she always told me that all the Catholics that she knew of growing up, they all threw the best parties. Them and the Jews that she knew. So apparently, Catholics and Jews are the best at partying.
I would argue that it's integral to that good style of living that drinking be part of it. And a healthy love of drinking actually flows from that lifestyle.
He defined a Puritan as someone who cannot stand the thought of anyone, anywhere, at any point, any place in the world, having fun. You know, you get these images in the 1950s of people of like a good father is one who never drinks, ever, at all. The only time he opens this bottle of brandy is to pour it over a cake at Christmas time.
Well, it's a principle of life, I think, that the toughest path to walk is the reasonable middle, that's actually focused on being true and not focused on being ideological. If I'm going to make a fair assessment of what alcohol does, I can look at the drawbacks, right? I can look at that light, moderate, heavy drinking, what those do to one's health. I can look at the effects it can have on society. I can look at the bad things that it can fuel. But my analysis is going to be incomplete if I don't look at the good things it can fuel. So what are those things? Do you have your whiskey?
I do.
All right.
Here it is.
Excellent.
And I believe, yes, that's more of the, wow, after one glass, I already forgot its name.
Old Forester?
The Old Forester. Yes, thank you. Good and smoky. But the right kind of smoky. Yeah, I think whiskey kind of operates sometimes on the same principle that wine does. Or really any form of alcohol. Some have to breathe first before they are really, really good. And like with Old Forester, it's like I said before, it's that one that you have to get past the first glass.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you pick it up again after the first glass and after you've let it sit for a couple of days, it's really, really good. But that first glass is probably going to be almost a little bit overpowering. At least if you drink it right out of the bottle. I didn't try... next bottle of Old Forester I get, I'm going to try letting the first glass sit for about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
Just so it can aerate, because that's what you want to do with a glass of wine. I remember my brother and I had this experience with a glass of wine. I think it was a Portuguese wine. It was a red of some kind. And my brother has one of those. It might have been a Madeira, but my brother has one of those wine subscriptions where they send him just a box full of wine every month.
Okay.
It's Laithwaite's, if anybody's ever heard of that. So basically, he gets this bottle out. I think it was a Madeira. Don't quote me on it, but I think so. And he says, hey, it's this Portuguese wine. It's supposed to be really good. Why don't we try it? And I said, all right, sure. Good wine. I'm always down for it. So he pours us a couple of glasses, and we both take a drink, and we both make the same face at the same time. We both kind of go. And then we look at each other like, why don't we set that down for a little bit? Maybe let that breathe for a minute. And we let it breathe for about maybe 5 minutes.
Okay.
And it was one of the smoothest and richest and sweetest red wines that I have ever had.
All right, then.
And I think Old Forester operates kind of on the same principle. I know a lot of whiskeys can, because it was the same thing with my bottle of Pinckney Bend whiskey, the corn whiskey. First drink I had out of it was good. The second drink, the corn was almost overpowering. But then the third drink, it was even better than the first drink.
Okay.
I know exposure to oxygen does weird chemical stuff. I'm not a scientist. Chemistry was my worst subject in high school. I don't know how any of that works. All I know is that I like corn whiskey, and I like bourbon, and I like a good red wine. And if it's got to breathe a little bit, I'm willing to wait the 5 or 10 minutes for that glass to be exactly the right oxygenation.
Part of the character of it, that it does evolve and change and all these good things, which makes it more beautiful and cool. So, and if you want a shortcut to letting it breathe, and this is coming from somebody who drinks his whiskey neat 99% of the time, what you can do is put a little bit of water, just a few drops in there, and that will open it up and explode the flavors. If you put too much water in there, it won't have that effect. But if you put just a few drops, it'll have a good effect.
That is the big reason for why people want to put ice in their whiskey. Because watering it down a little bit does help. But
yeah,
I was always under the impression that drinking it neat puts hairs on your chest.
No, fair enough.
Which, if you're Greek, you don't need any more hair on your chest. But if you're like me and have Irish blood, you still need a few.
All right, then. But tonight I actually have put ice in my whiskey because I have finally made one of my legendary old fashions, partly consumed already. So
one of your legendary old fashions.
Yes, I am very proud of my old fashions.
You will make one of those for me at some point because I like a good old fashioned.
Well, I will. You can see there's no little bit of orange in there. There's a giant thick wedge of orange.
Which is the right way to do it.
Yep.
You don't just put a tiny little sprig or some bitters. You put the actual, like a blue moon sized wedge of orange.
Yep. You don't skimp on maraschino cherries. You get the actual Luxardo ones. Make your own simple syrup. Put a certain amount of that in there and a certain amount of bitters in there, and I'll not say what that is. A little bit of water. But I will say what the whiskey is for it. I've done different whiskeys for it. I've had different good ones. I prefer Four Roses Small Batch. I love Four Roses Small Batch. And I love that neat because it's a beautifully floral. It's a beautifully floral whiskey. Neat.
That's why it's called Four Roses.
Yeah, well, it's delicious, but it works really good in this, I gotta say.
Well, see, it already has that that sort of sweetness and richness to it. So I feel like making an old fashioned with it would be even better. Mm-hmm. It would just accentuate that even more. Now, my mother-in-law makes an old fashioned with Woodford Reserve.
Woodford's also very good, and
that, I think, is one of the best, at least in name, it's one of the best whiskeys out there.
Mm-hmm. Especially for the price. Yeah, for the price point at it is, it's very good.
It is the official whiskey of the Kentucky Derby.
That is. And one of the best old fashions I ever got from a restaurant, from a used Woodford. I remember that distinctly.
And my mother-in-law does make a fantastic old fashioned.
Unbelievable.
So maybe next time you do come down to visit, you can make your old fashioned and my mother-in-law can make hers, and I can actually taste test and find out which is better.
All right.
You can go head to head with my mother-in-law in making old fashions.
All right. I'll apologize for a loss ahead of time. No, that'll be a worthy battle because I'm sure she makes a darn good one.
She makes a darn good one. She's, brought up in New York City, so, well, in Long Island, but which is like the Midwest of New York.
Also, how you know I'm a proper Midwestern is that I actually use bourbon. Wisconsinites decided to skimp and do brandy old fashions. Why, I don't know. But that's
Please don't start lobbing shots at Charlie Barons. I don't want to get into that fight.
He's
a fellow Catholic. I don't want to start throwing shots downrange at him.
He makes an excellent fish fry, but I make a better old fashioned. So, and also knowing him, I don't see how he would make a better old fashioned than me.
He does have his own brand of brandy now.
Oh, he does?
Yeah. Barron's Old Fashioned Brandy.
Okay.
I believe that he made specifically for mixing.
I would be curious to try
for brandy old fashioned. I would be.
So.
I don't know if I can get it anywhere outside of Wisconsin, but,
Well, that
is actually to a point later on down in the podcast.
Oh. We'll get there when we get there. But the topic of the evening for us is drinking. So this has been an appropriate start.
I can talk about drinking all day long.
You might as well. There's so many things you can say, especially in the modern world. But perhaps where I'd like to start is that image that Sarah from your old job has of Catholic families. Like what is it that gives them so much joy? that she observes, even though she herself is not a Catholic?
Well, her experience with the Catholic families, she always told me that all the Catholics that she knew growing up, they all threw the best parties. Them and the Jews that she knew. So apparently, Catholics and Jews are the best at partying. I think for different reasons, but I think it's this image that we have of the Irish, the Italians, the Polish, of the good, strong Catholics who know actually where the line of sin is when it comes to certain things, who actually know what temperance is. We do know how to have a good time. Because not only do we know how to have a good time, we know when to properly have a good time.
It's true.
And
we have days for fasting and we have days for feasting.
And we know that sometimes one of the best thing in life is, as the name of this podcast implies, a fire in the hearth and a drink in your hand. And maybe a pipe, but my wife was not going to let me smoke a pipe for a little while because I still have a baby in the house.
Fair enough.
So until you and I are physically together and we can actually record this outside, unless that happens sometime in that time period, I'm not going to be allowed to smoke again. But I don't know. Personally, I think it'd be fine because he's upstairs and I'm down here, and that smoke will dissipate within time. But anyway, tobacco is another topic, and we might cover that next week.
Maybe. It would be a
But
way
I
to
also
piggyback
don't
to
want to
this.
be smoking. I also want to be smoking when that happens. So at some point, we'll cover tobacco. Tonight, alcohol, the other bane of Protestantism.
It is. So that's the image of Catholics, and it's well earned. And it fits with the image of family living that we've promoted over the past episodes on this podcast. That is, in a word, Shire-esque, you could say. That doesn't have to literally reflect that, but there should be elements of that there.
There should be elements of it, because Tolkien himself also did, in at least one letter, point out that he did not believe the Shire to be a utopia.
Well, it's not, yeah.
Because it's not. There is much good in the Shire. But for one thing, the hobbits are not a particularly religious people. And they are also kind of lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say that a much better image of it, the Shire improved, is the antebellum American South.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Is when the poor farmers all have a community together and they know how to work. Particularly the Catholic American South, where the Catholic farmers all together, they know how to work, they know how to rest, and they know how to celebrate.
That's what you're supposed to do.
And when you do all those things correctly, your life is actually perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Tragedy may happen at times. Bad things may happen. But I'm also reminded of after President Kennedy's assassination. There is a story that I remember because the Kennedy family is an old Irish family, predominantly Catholic, although it's mostly, Catholic, especially now. But after the president was assassinated, he had an Irish wake, which is where the Irish Catholics basically just sit around and drink and tell stories. And that's basically what President Kennedy's funeral was like. All the Catholics sat around and drank and told stories, and the Protestants were scandalized by the Catholics sitting around and drinking and telling stories.
Yeah.
Because that is how we remember our fallen. We sit around, we drink, and we tell stories.
Which ties into the theme of what we'd like to talk about tonight. Because you could use the antebellum South as an image of good living.
The antebellum South is also particularly Protestant, so it has that going against it.
I'll still, for this podcast, use the image of the Shire, knowing that it's not a utopia, and knowing that not everybody can live in the Shire for reasons that will be delved much deeper into on a Lord of the Rings podcast.
Yeah, someone has to live in Minas Tirith.
Exactly. But anyway, I would argue that it's integral to that good style of living that drinking be part of it. And a healthy love of drinking actually flows from that lifestyle, which is contrary to what our Protestant brothers and sisters might believe. They don't tend to be as happy as us in that regard. Why is that?
So, the general culture of this nation has at its root Protestantism, and particularly Calvinism, as that's who the Pilgrims were. The first people that came over in 1620, at least the ones that we all remember about the first Thanksgiving and all of that, the ones that established the colonies in Massachusetts and Connecticut and maybe Rhode Island. I'm not sure. But at the very least, the colony of Massachusetts, which is ultimately the fundamental American way of life. That is the fundamental philosophy of America, comes out of Massachusetts. Whether you like it or not, that's where it comes from. They were Calvinist, Puritans. They were fleeing religious persecution from Anglican England because Anglicans and Calvinists do not get along. Anglicans still want to have, without recognizing papal authority, they still want to kind of have the way of life of Catholics.
Calvinists, they are the denomination that's like closest to Catholicism. So
technically speaking, except for the women priests, which will be another thing. But the Calvinist way of life. So here's how Calvinists think. Calvinism ultimately boils down to there are a certain amount of people that are going to be saved. Positively, absolutely. And a certain amount of people that won't be.
Predestination, we call it.
This is kind of true because God knows who will come to heaven and who will not. Which there is a modern heresy that is kind of springing off of this, that when heaven is at capacity, the end of the world will come and then everybody will just go to hell.
What a beautiful way of looking at the world.
No, Catholics aren't supposed to be depressed. Anyway, so here's what happens with the Calvinist mentality of things. When you believe that you are one of the saved, because that's what all Calvinists believe, that they are of the saved, which Calvinism evolved into modern evangelicalism, ultimately. The Calvinists believe that they are the saved. So they are going to behave like the saved. And ultimately that boils down to Christianity being about more about what we don't do rather than what we do. So the idea of Calvinism, Puritanism, which is an even more radical form of Calvinism, if that is even possible, which, by the way, is why they're not still alive. That's why the Puritans aren't still around. Puritanism basically is absolutely no drinking, no dancing, and no fun. No fun of whatever kind at all. And I remember a good numerary of Opus Dei, a Spaniard, who came in the nice variety of Spaniard. Apparently there's only two varieties of Spaniard. They're either assholes or they're just the sweetest and nicest people you'll ever meet. This one was of the second variety. But he basically said in a group meditation that we had, this is back when I was in high school, in a group meditation that we had, a group we just called it a talk. Basically, he defined a Puritan as someone who, I'll try to do his accent, who cannot stand the thought of anyone, anywhere, at any point, any place in the world, having fun. Puritans cannot stand fun. They cannot stand celebration. And there are two books that I read in high school and in junior high that sort of enlightened me as to the culture of the Puritans. One is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne.
A classic by many estimations.
A classic, yes. it is worth one read. Because the only thing that I remember about that is it took an entire chapter for the minister to walk across town. I also think that I was way too young and way too immature to be able to appreciate it at the time, because I think I read that in like 8th grade. That's like senior in high school material.
I know I read it at one point too. I can't remember when. So
the other book is called The Witch of Blackbird Pond. And that book is about this girl who lives in a Puritan community who befriends this old woman that lives at Blackbird Pond, and everybody calls her a witch, and they start bringing false accusations against her for being a witch, but she's just an old widow who lives by herself. And it kind of presents this image of the Puritans that I think is reasonably accurate, because the Puritans also had the Salem witch trials, which they might have had a couple of witches. They may have had a few, because that is actually what witches try to do. They go into the mountains and into the woods. They want to separate themselves from society, but they tend to form covens, groups of just themselves, where they practice their witchcraft and their sorcery and whatever else they do.
Yeah.
And one of these days we may have a podcast about the Salem witch trials, because that's actually a very interesting story. But so there are two things about Puritans. One is that they think life is supposed to be miserable, and that you're not supposed to ever have any fun of any kind, because all fun leads to sin, and anything that can lead to sin ever has to be completely eradicated from your life, and you basically just have to be a miserable idiot with a stick up your ass.
Unfortunate.
How very unfortunate. The other thing is that they cannot stand seeing people not live the way they do. Like, it actually fills them with rage to know that somebody exists, at least within their reach, that does not live the way that they do. Which is part of the whole story of the Witch of Blackbird Pond, is that this woman is different from all of them, and so a few bad things happen in the town, so they want somebody to blame, so they start blaming her. They say that she's a witch and she's put a curse on all of them, when really she's just this poor old widow that wants to be left alone.
Sounds like I would get into a lot of trouble in a Puritan town. And as long as I'm just passing through, that'd be fun.
Oh, they're the kind of people that would probably burn us at the stake. Because Puritans also tend to think that Catholics are warlocks and sorcerers, and they think that the Catholic Church itself is the whore of Babylon. That's why I said that modern evangelicals are descended from Puritans.
How very unfortunate for them, more than me.
And these are some of the people that founded our nation, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, so basically it boils down to, and again, I'm going to steal a phrase from my friend Sarah: no drinking, no dancing, no fun. Because at any time you're happy or having fun or being entertained, you're evil. You're doing something evil, because near occasion of sin and just anything that can potentially lead you to sin in its excess must be evil.
Mm-hmm.
If drinking too much is bad, then drinking at all must also be bad. Which is kind of where we get this general idea, and it lasts up until the middle of the last century. You get these images in the 1950s of people of like a good father is one who never drinks ever at all. The only time he opens this bottle of brandy is to pour it over a cake at Christmas time.
And this is an image from the 50s?
Mm-hmm.
Thought we fixed prohibition before that, but I guess not.
It kind of starts to come around, but the response to that winds up being excess in drink.
Mm-hmm.
It winds up being so here's how it happens. There is a spike in alcoholism after the First World War, understandably so.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's wives decide, well, we're not going to show any love to our men if they drink.
Yeah, lips that touch liquor will never touch mine.
Exactly. So we're not going to have any more liquor. So the state, the government, actually bans the sale of alcohol. That's why it's called prohibition, because this becomes illegal fully and totally. If it was 1928, I could go to jail for drinking this. I don't want to live in the 20s. 100 years ago, this would be illegal, massively illegal, because everybody thinks that alcohol in itself is an evil. It's this, again, very Protestant idea that the thing that is used to do evil is itself evil. The tool is evil. So if we get rid of the tool, then we'll get rid of the evil. Man is good until he is given an evil tool, because an evil tool can only be used for evil. This is where we get the idiotic gun control laws. This is where we get a lot of stupidity.
Well, it's a principle of life, I think, that the toughest path to walk is the reasonable middle. The that's actually focused on being true and not focused on being ideological.
It's called the virtuous mean.
Yeah, it is.
It's the middle point on the pendulum swing between two opposing vices.
Yeah. It's easy to want to be ideological and go on either side of the pendulum, but when you do that, we know what pendulums do. You create the opposite effect. And so when you have a generation that goes too far with anything, the opposite generation is
ultimately
very
there is an effect that it swings back the other way, and those that understand physics know that anytime if you start a pendulum over here and then let it swing, when it swings back, it won't come to the same point.
Mm-hmm.
It'll stop a little bit in front of it. We've all seen people do the experiment. We've all seen physics professors do the experiment with the bowling ball on a rope. Mm-hmm. He holds it right in front of his face and then stops and lets it go. And it stops right at the tip of his nose and keeps going.
Yep.
We've all seen that. That's not how it is with vice. The more of something bad you get, the more you want. Actually has the opposite effect. So with vices, when you start at this end, as soon as you rebel against that and tug on it, it yanks you over to this end.
Yeah.
And way farther over here than you started at over here. So the Puritans have this idea that, alcohol is bad. And then when they have this idea of what temperance is, it means, not actually drinking it, but, we'll pour brandy over our Christmas turkey, or we'll bake cake. We'll bake a cake with rum or anything like that. Like, to a point where comedy bits where somebody is depicted as being drunk, which is funny. Foster Brooks is one of the funniest men that ever lived. Did one of the funniest drunk impressions of it ever done. Never touched a drink in his life. But his drunk bit is probably the best ever done. Because we should be laughing at drunks.
Yeah.
Because they need to be laughed at. They need to see how absurd they are. We don't laugh at them when they're sober. We laugh at them when they're drunk.
Yeah, be sad if the laughter doesn't work.
Right? But even to a point where that is seen as something horrible and bad, and we shouldn't be laughing at that because it's a sin, and if we laugh at a sin, we make it seem like it's a good thing, which is not why we laugh at things. There are a few reasons why we laugh at things, which ultimately we'll talk about when we talk about entertainment and comedy, but there are a few reasons why we laugh at things, one of which is absurdity, stupidity. We laugh at things that are wrong because we want to laugh in the face of evil. We want to laugh at the devil and tell him how stupid and ignorant and low he is, because it makes him feel worse and it weakens him.
And if we
We
do it with God at our back, we win.
exactly. We want to laugh in the devil's face because we are one with God. We want to laugh in his face because a 14-year-old girl in Nazareth has more power than him, which is what he cannot stand more than anything in the world. So this idea that, oh, well, if we laugh at people being drunk, then people are going to want to do that because then they'll think they're being funny. That actually plants that idea in people's heads where you start to look at people and go, oh, I think that guy would be really funny if he was drunk. It's this inversion. It's this opposite end of the pendulum swing.
Yep, and then the next generation swings it back. It's how it tends to go.
So it swings this way and then it swings back. And that's where we ultimately get like fraternity culture.
Mm-hmm.
People doing keg stands and trying to consume as much alcohol as they possibly can before passing out.
There was somebody that I once was chatting with because, they were going off on we'll just say a rather puritanical train of thought with regards to health or whatever. And I remember telling them basically, like, if you want to convince people to do the opposite, do exactly what you're doing. It's extraordinarily effective. Like it doesn't work when you come from that extreme view. Which forms my view that extreme views require extreme proof.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to go farther out the risk curve, you are taking more risks. In other words, you better be right. And there's only a few cases where that's true. Catholicism being one of them. Like, we make extraordinarily bold claims because we're right, because we are irrevocably, incontrovertibly right. Like, that gives me the basis to do that. You propose the next conspiracy theory, though, now you're going to have fun. Extreme views require extreme proof.
Yeah. You want to propose that Bridget Macron is a man? You prove it.
Have fun. Have fun with that. I will not be with you.
I'm just going to sit here and watch you make a fool out of yourself.
Yep. So exactly.
You want to prove that JD Vance is some CIA plant? Have fun. I'll sit here and watch you rant and rave and make a fool out of yourself.
But that's the Puritan mindset towards alcohol. So what do modern health professionals say about it? And in my research for it.
You've researched this more than I have. I have about 2 cents to offer, but you have the other 98.
Well, yeah, I did my research on it because I know that there's this instinct out there that, you see a lot of videos, what happens when I quit alcohol? Or I quit alcohol, why you should too. It's a lot of what it comes down to. So I did a little bit of looking at what certain health professionals would say. And what I found from, the couple people I looked at was actually quite level-headed. If you basically look at kind of a threshold of 7 drinks per week in the US, below that you're a low drinker, above that you're a moderate drinker. Apparently when you get into the moderate stuff, your risk of cancer, the association with cancer just goes up kind of across the board, with some of them even at low levels. And it can cause problems with your heart when you get into that moderate level of drinking. We know that it's not the best for the brain. Basically, it promotes inflammation and coats your brain cells in ethanol. That's not the best thing in the world. It reduces anxiety in people. We know that it helps with social interactions. We know that it has that it can give you a high, kind of like cocaine, not to the level of cocaine, obviously, but some of the same psychomotor stuff is going on. So, like, those things happen, and I think there's a reasonable way to read that, but there's still a lot of people that look at that and adopt a rather modern Puritanist view towards it. Just like, this is always bad, or it's usually bad. I'm rarely going to engage with this, or I'm never going to engage with it. And look at how much sharper my brain will be. Look at how much more fit I will be. Look at all the things that I can do. Look at the fact that I can live longer. And not that there's no good to that. They can also pull the card of, alcohol has its own negative effects in society. You know, we see cases where it fuels murder. We see cases where it fuels date rape. We see cases where it fuels abuse. I've heard that basically all, I assume, sexual or marital or some sort of abuse is fueled by alcohol in one form or another. Not like,
Alcohol or some form of drug.
yeah. So, like, they have arguments. But where I would propose that they fall short is, for one, just like you said with gun control laws, you can't blame the tool necessarily for the violence that it causes or that it is used for. That doesn't, because the gun doesn't cause the shot. The person pulling the trigger does. The
Unless
alcohol
it's a
doesn't
Sig
cause
P320.
the alcohol doesn't cause the abuse necessarily. That comes when you mix alcohol with a bad person. So who caused it? The bad person or the alcohol? You know, or alcohol causes binge drinking. Okay, so what caused that? The alcohol or the
why is somebody binge drinking? Why does somebody have a tendency to it? It could be inherited. Like, we do know that there is some tendency for alcoholism to be inherited.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the reason that, so when I was growing up, we never had any alcohol in the house, ever. The reason for that was my dad was about 28 years old when he realized two things. One was that he never had a drink he didn't like. The second was that his grandfather died an alcoholic. And it's a very sad story, and we pray for his soul. But there was one year my great-grandmother convinced her husband, my great-grandfather, to go and have a beer with his friends. A few years later, that turned into him keeping a bottle of whiskey behind the passenger seat of his truck. Now, if you go into it knowing something like that, if you go into it knowing that I know that the men in my family have a tendency toward intemperance of various kinds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know to this day, neither of my uncles drink. I don't think so. Well, I think one of my uncles will occasionally have a glass of wine, but to my knowledge, neither of my uncles touch alcohol because of their grandfather.
No, and that makes sense. I mean,
and my own grandfather, before he died, up until the point that he died, I think he never had beer more than once a week. And I don't think he ever touched anything stronger than beer because that was his father.
So those stories, yeah, people have to wrestle with them. And not only do you have to learn to use it prudently, but yeah, it causes a lot of damage when it's not.
You also have to live with seeing somebody else destroy himself.
Yeah.
And with you not being able to do anything about it. But you have to understand that you are not the same person, that you are different.
Mm-hmm.
I know the men of my family have a struggle with intemperance, but I'm just as much my mother as I am my father.
Mm-hmm. And even if you...
And I know that my mother's dad never had any problem with drink whatsoever.
Well, and even if your mother's side of the family was the same way, you're a Catholic. You're a son of God. You know what virtue is, and we know that virtue can be learned. And
it's knowing where the line is and not crossing it.
Exactly. And if that line's different for you than other people, so be it. Like, anything I say tonight saying that alcohol is a good thing, if you're an alcoholic, none of this applies to you. At all.
No, if you're an alcoholic, avoid it at every possible cost.
Yeah, the line for you is 0.
Yeah.
You know? But that is congruent.
If you're an alcoholic and you need to recover, or if you know that you have the tendency to it, then you need to practice more self-discipline than somebody that does not.
Exactly.
And there are certain ethnicities, certain races that do actually have more resistance to the effects of alcohol. Like the Germans, the Irish, the Polish, the Russians. There are certain people that have more resistance to alcohol than others. You also need to know that sort of thing. You need to know how it will affect you. You also need to be able to, if you can, You should build up something of a resistance to it.
Well, beyond that, I mean, yeah, there's different ethnicities that matter, but we'll come back to this, but the earlier point, like the binge drinking, what caused that? The alcohol or the culture that created it? Or
What is it
your
that's
own temperament?
caused him to start on the bender in the first place?
Yeah.
Like, what caused a man's first bender? Was it the fact that he got drunk and liked it? Or were there extenuating circumstances that caused him to get drunk in the first place?
Exactly. Beyond that, within some of the arguments against alcohol that I laid out, there is a subtle, I would call it a heresy, that health is a physical thing. And only a
That health
physical
is
thing.
purely and only physical thing.
Yeah. A lot of, like...
Well, it stems from a modern heresy that, since the Enlightenment, that the physical world is all that there is, which is what capitalism and communism both have their roots in, is that the physical world is all there is and is all that matters. So when you add atheism on top of moral Puritanism and Calvinism, you get the most miserable people ever. Either the most miserable or the most licentious.
All right, let me get on with this.
But you keep going ahead.
Health is not purely a physical thing, I would say. And it doesn't take much effort to think that, but this type of heresy slips into our worldview. Yeah, if I look at alcohol from the view of, well, it's going to give me a beer belly, although that's not something to strive for, and I look at it as
necessarily something to avoid either.
When I look at it as something where it's going to reduce my brain mass, when I look at it as something like it's going to make me less sharp, when I look at it as something where it is going to lower the number of years that I am on this earth, apparently, or there is some sort of risk of that, either through disease or just longevity or whatever. That only makes sense if a human person is a machine, and we are not machines. We are not cogs in the productivity wheel of modern capitalism. Yeah. We are human beings. We are sons and daughters of God.
We are not flesh machines. We are the children of God, and we must act like it, which means that there is a time to sow and a time to reap. There is a time to weep, a time to mourn. There is a time to rejoice.
And if I'm going to make a fair assessment of what alcohol does, I can look at the drawbacks, right? I can look at that light, moderate, heavy drinking, what those do to one's health. I can look at the effects it can have on society. I can look at the bad things that it can fuel. But my analysis is going to be incomplete if I don't look at the good things it can fuel. So what are those things? I return to the same image of Shire living. I return to the same image of what Sarah finds awesome about Catholic families throwing parties. It's joy. It's merriment. It's community. It's conversation. There's something to lowering somebody's anxiety and fueling these things in a good community. There's
being able to loosen up, and there is something to the loosen up and let your hair down.
Yeah,
which applies more to me than it does to Dominic, but
whatever. I'm gonna lose my hair. You can keep growing it. There's something to losing one's inhibitions so that they can further glorify God and bring others closer to Him. And that doesn't mean get drunk. That's a grave sin. Don't do that.
Deliberately getting drunk is a grave sin. If you inadvertently got drunk because you didn't know where your limit was and you got offered one more drink and you took it thinking you could take it and you couldn't, that might be a sin, but it's not grave.
This is why there's a difference between grave and mortal sins. So anybody who has looked at an image of a good person drinking, of a good community drinking, of the joy that brings, of a good gathering, they should be able to figure out that there is a temperate way to do this. So, and it's possible that most people who listen to this will not have been exposed to that. And that's sad. But I can promote it nonetheless. And I can say, if that's the way your friends are, find better friends. Or try to,
Yeah,
If that's the way your community is, try and reform it.
I would
Try
say
and say there is a good way to use this thing. I don't
I
need
would
to go
say
buy the 6-pack of Miller Lite and just down it in a night.
I would say that
I can do this instead.
most people's exposure and culture about alcohol in general. Which, this being said, I drink a lot faster than you do. I've had two, and it takes and the time it's taken you to have like 2/3. But most people's culture around alcohol in general, mostly it's either the absence or the excess. It's either, well, we really don't care, we're just going to have as much fun as possible, and getting drunk is fun, and we like getting drunk, and that's the reason alcohol exists, is to get drunk, so we're just going to use it and get drunk. Or it's the, well, alcohol only exists so that you can get drunk and that you can overuse it, so we're not going to do it at all. That's most people's, at least in our country, that's most people's exposure to it.
Mm-hmm.
When the actual exposure to it is, a lot of alcoholic beverages taste really good. And sometimes there is a reason to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to acknowledge that there is a risk.
Yeah, and so it's a matter of finding that temperate mean. And if you want, there's a number of ways to define that, and where your line is going to be different per person. But here's one quick idea that we already said. There are days for fasting and there are days for feasting. And feasting doesn't mean drink the 6-pack.
Yeah.
Drinking, feasting doesn't mean do what I fear you're going to do when I overhear you talking about going drinking on the weekend.
Yeah.
That means do precisely what Ethan and I are doing.
Yes. Drink over conversation.
Yeah. Contemplate the higher things. So
it's also worth noting that Aquinas has things to say about alcohol.
Oh, it does.
What Aquinas calls the point of hilarity, which is why I'm not having any more.
Okay.
There is and what he calls the point of hilarity is the line, which, as far as amount of alcohol consumed, does differ between people based on your experience with alcohol, your lineage, what it is that you're drinking. That can all vary.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 2 times in my life that I have been the most drunk that I have ever been, when I have known exactly what the point of hilarity was. According to Aquinas, you can go up to it and no further. And it's basically this time that you've been drinking, you've enjoyed drinking, and when you drink to the point that you were happy when you started, but you're a lot happier now. You're very, very happy, but you still have complete control over your actions.
Mm-hmm. Your faculties are still your own.
That's the point of hilarity, is that you may not be thinking 100% straight, but you still are in control of yourself. When you are drunk, when you have gone past that, is when you can no longer control yourself. When you are purely acting based on your passions, when you have basically turned your entire brain off, except the bestial part of it, and you have reduced yourself into a drooling animal. That's what the point of hilarity is. Once you go past it, you're a drooling animal. When you go up to it, you're still a human being. And I'm going to interject another quote from my friend Sarah that I think is very, very applicable.
Mm-hmm.
Something she told me more than once. Life is too short to drink vodka from a plastic bottle. We'll get more into what that means later on.
Fair enough.
But
it's funny. We're doing a Catholic podcast on alcohol, and we've quoted an atheist raised by lesbians more than we've quoted Aquinas.
More than once. Aquinas or Chesterton or Bonaventure or Augustine or anybody or even St. Paul.
Yep. We're not the only right people, though. All truth is ours.
Truth
So,
is still truth. It doesn't matter who it comes from or who discovers it. It is still the truth.
exactly.
And it is to be adopted by us.
Mm-hmm.
When it's something we haven't thought of before, but it is still true, that's what we call baptizing a tradition, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway.
Which is why if there's a Puritan doctor out there that's saying, alcohol's terrible for you and here's why, I'd be like, hey, you have some fair points, and now I'm going to go run. And I'm going to go have a drink.
A couple of times I've heard this. There's these studies out, which I hear the word study, and the first thing I think of is a very apt quote from Mark Twain, that there are lies, damned lies, and statistics. Every time I hear, there's this study out now, or there's these studies out, they're basically saying that, any amount of alcohol is bad for you in the long run. And my basic reaction is, I also don't really care. Because I have also seen the number of men and women, the number of World War II veterans who have lived to 97 years old and have had a glass of whiskey and a cigar every day of their lives since they were old enough to have it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I'm yes, that flies in the face of your study. And why am I trying to prolong my life on this earth anyway? I shouldn't actively be trying to shorten it, but why am I trying to actively prolong it?
Yeah, there's something to be said for living a full life and something to be said for wanting to live, more years than not. But if you're trying to live as long as possible, then to a degree you're treating yourself like a machine. Yeah. And you're stealing from the present to contribute to the future, and not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, you should take care of your car. You should get the oil change. You should get new tires on it. You should do everything that needs to be done for a machine to run properly for as long as humanly possible. Your body is not a machine. Your body is a part of you as a human being, because we are body, mind, and soul. We are all of those things. And you need to take care of all of those. And you know what? Sometimes having a drink, quieting down, having a good conversation like we're having now is good for the mind and for the soul.
Exactly.
Maybe it's bad for the body, but it's better for the other two parts of us. Which, by the way, I actually want to know the parts of those studies, the people in those studies that they looked at that got the cancer and all the other things. I want to look at other factors that might have been stress-inducing, that might have been detrimental to either the mind or the soul. Because a lot of what I've seen lately is that a lot of cancers come more from modern stress than they do from other outside factors.
Yeah. No, I want to do the same thing. So
I want to look at that.
When I was thinking of that when doing some of my research on this, for one of them, heavy drinking. So I don't even know where that is, if that's 14 a week or whatever. But 40% increase in cancer across large populations, right? So what do you mean by large populations, and what are the causes being studied? And I'm not saying heavy drinking is a good thing.
Well, there's an obvious effect that alcohol has on the liver. Because everybody has either seen personally or knows about somebody that has been a heavy drinker and has died of liver failure. Because when you consume alcohol, you're putting your liver through the ringer.
Yeah.
It's not easy on your liver trying to process alcohol, which is the other reason to be temperate about it. Because if you're temperate about it, you are either doing that, you're either doing it at a rate that your liver can more easily recover, or you are training your liver to get stronger and be able to do it better. But if you're just an alcoholic that goes off on a binge of 2 and 3 days at a time of nonstop drinking, you're going to destroy your liver. It's going to be a pickle by the time you die.
Yeah, and apparently moderate drinking over a sustained period of time is bad for your liver, but binge drinking is even worse. If you just have a blowout weekend.
bad for your liver.
Yeah. And bad
But
for
I imagine that's the same way that, driving an old car once a week is technically bad for the engine because it's putting some wear and tear on it.
Yeah, like it's not something I have to
Same
fear.
kind of thing.
What I should fear is the anxiety and the stress. And not to say to turn to alcohol to your problems. Like I wouldn't say I had a really crappy day at the week, so I'm gonna go, just hang out at the bar and be by myself and have a few drinks. I wouldn't exactly call that healthy. But if I were sitting and having a good conversation like we are now, why couldn't that be a good thing? Because you can say, yeah, sure, it affects your cancer risk, it affects your liver, fine. But again, so does anxiety.
Yeah, whether it's a good conversation with a good glass of whiskey, a really good beer, like Golden Ale Dragon's Milk,
Yep.
Tales of Gold, or a really good tobacco, because nicotine actually does. Well, the difference with nicotine is that it actually does, in its purest form, have some health benefits. But that'll be in the smoking episode. If that can reduce the stresses of your life, then you actually will have genuine greater longevity. And you'll just have a fuller kind of longevity.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will know the peace and the joy of life, of just having a good conversation with somebody over a good glass of whatever your favorite happens to be. I don't really judge what your favorite happens to be, except in some cases. But whatever your favorite is to have with a good conversation and with reason, because you should have a reason to drink, then you will probably have a much fuller life. Whether or not it's longer is ultimately up to God. You will have a much fuller life. Because 100% of healthy people die. Only about 5% of them actually truly live.
Yeah. That's well said.
Because your spiritual and mental health is equally important to your physical health. Because we are all three, we are mind, body, and spirit, we should be caring for all three in the same way. And if having a drink every now and again is good for your mental and physical and spiritual health, that will ultimately translate into your physical health. You will be low stress, low anxiety. I've also experienced anxiety. It gives me really bad stomach issues. That's why a really good doctor will see some stomach issues and go, I think you need to quit your job. Quit your job, find a different boyfriend or girlfriend, and just be more peaceful in life. Because that's ultimately what this is for. It is for peace. And it is for joy.
It really is. That should go on one of our t-shirts, by the way. 100% of healthy people die, but only 5% truly live. That's so brilliant.
I stole the first part of that from an Opus Dei priest from a meditation from almost a decade ago.
Oh, well.
Actually, over a decade ago. But yeah, 100% of healthy people die. You're at some point going to die. You should not fear death. You should fear a badly lived life. You should fear your children not caring that you died. And I've seen that at funerals. I've seen people chewing gum in the pews of funerals because they didn't really care that their mother had just passed away.
Yeesh.
That is what you should be afraid of.
So I guess
it shouldn't be death itself. Death is nothing. Our Lord destroyed death. He defeated it. And he gave us eternal life as a reward. So whatever can bring you eternal life, ultimately, you should embrace. And if the right conversation over the right alcohol is what ultimately, or at least starts you on the path to eternal life, that is a good.
Can't argue. So in short, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of facets to life, but at least with regards to the alcohol facet of life, basically have three options. Option one is treat yourself as a finely tuned machine and nothing more. You are going to spin the hamster wheel faster and more efficiently than anybody else. You're going to be more productive than anybody else. You're going to live longer than anybody else. You're going to make more money than anybody else and have the highest paying job of anybody. But ultimately be miserable, because any reasonable person can figure out where that ends up. Option two is that you decide to use alcohol to respond to the stresses of life, but and to celebrate life because of either bad upbringing, bad companions,
Bad examples.
and ill-formed conscience. You use it to excess.
Because you think that alcohol will quiet the voices.
Yeah. And the evils of that require no explanation. Or option three is you be a hobbit. Option three is
Hang on, there's nothing that says that the men of Rohan don't enjoy a good drink every now and again. They have good ale there.
I'm reducing it to a hobbit for now. But do they have a tough life? Sure. Do they have to make ends meet? Yes. Do they have to get along with their neighbors? Yes. Do they have to engage in politics? Yes. Do they have to do all the things of life? Yes. And are those stressful? Yes. And yet they are joyful.
There is no greater stress than having to tolerate the Sackville Bagginses.
Yeah. To have joy while tolerating the Sackville Bagginses. How about that?
But there is always a full cask of wine. Somewhere. At somebody's house. If you just sit down and say, you know what? A glass of wine sounds really good right about now. Because of what you've just been through dealing with the Sackville Bagginses, that's understandable. Have a glass of wine.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment you think you need it is the moment that you should not have it. There's been multiple times in my life where I've sat down and my wife has looked at me and gone, "You look like you could use a beer." And I'm like, yeah, I think I could use a beer. And then she gives me a beer and then I feel better. After a beer. And a good beer.
Well, so you did need it. But you weren't dependent on it either. It was an aid.
Now, it's not that I needed it. I could use it. There's a difference between I need and I could use. Or I could go for it right now. So basically when you go, man, I could go for a Philly sandwich right now. Which I actually could. That sounds really good. Man, I could go for a Philly cheesesteak sandwich right now. That means that sounds really great right about now, and like it would be really helpful. But that does not mean that I require it in order to survive, or I require it in order to get through whatever I'm going through right now.
Yeah.
What it means is that would help me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That would make my life a little bit easier. And there is nothing wrong with saying, you know what, a beer or a glass of wine would make my life a little bit easier right now. The other day, I spent an entire morning in the shop trying something new, and it didn't work, and I wound up having to start over, and I was really pissed off and frustrated. And then I came upstairs, and my wife and my in-laws all said, "You look like you could use a beer." So I had a beer, and then I went downstairs, and I did fantastic. I did exactly what I was trying to do, better than I thought I was going to do it. And I thought of things I didn't think I was going to think of before.
Yeah.
So it can help, but it must be treated as such. The moment you think you require it in order to function, or the moment that you come home from work and go, man, I need a beer, or I'm just going to scream at my kids or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I don't get a beer in the next 10 seconds, I'm going to be terrible. That's when you actually shouldn't have it, because the problem at that point is you. Because you can't control yourself. You can't keep your temper in check. You can't keep your emotions in check. You have to rely on alcohol to do it for you. Now, there are some times when it's very difficult to control yourself, and alcohol can be a great help. Having a beer can be a great help.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think you need it, you should avoid it at every cost and at every opportunity. Avoid it.
But we've established the virtuous mean for this, so let's have some fun, you and I. What's your favorite beer? I'm just gonna go down the list. Different types of this.
My favorite, or
different
what is
libations.
objectively the best? Because objectively, the best beer is Guinness. And that's not just me saying it. Science also says it. Because Guinness is also the healthiest beer. People that drink Guinness on a regular basis actually do live longer.
What was it about lies, damned lies, and statistics?
I'm still a modern man. I occasionally use them when they serve my purposes.
Fine. It's okay. Guinness is the best, in your opinion.
Anyone that has had Guinness, I have only occasionally met people that don't like Guinness, that actually actively dislike Guinness.
Mm-hmm.
One is my good friend Sarah. But that's mostly because every beer she's had, for some reason didn't like.
All right, so that's
she
fair.
just has a natural aversion to beer, which is weird, but I'm not going to hold that against her. That's fine. The other group of people that despise Guinness are just they're just terrible people. I've never met a genuinely good person that hated Guinness as a concept or hated the taste of it.
All right.
So the best beer in the world is Guinness, brewed in Dublin. And by the way, the first batch ever brewed had a prayer of exorcism prayed over it.
Oh, nice.
By a priest. And they are still a strong Catholic family-owned company.
Okay, then.
And the reason I know this is because my brother told me of somebody that he met once when he was he had a course over in Ireland that he was doing. And one of the other guys, an Irishman that was on the course, had a grandmother who wrote to the company of Guinness. She was a loyal customer of Guinness for 40 years or more. And she wrote to them and said, and basically asked if Guinness was still a properly Catholic company or if it had been given over to the heathens and savages. And they wrote back and said, "We are still Catholic. We still love our Lord, the boy king of the universe. Here's a free 12-pack of the new the new brew that we have out."
Nice.
I think whatever edition I think it was just the label, but it was the anniversary edition or whatever it was. The one with the toucan on it. People will know that.
I remember that. That was years ago now. I'm old.
That was a few years ago, but she wrote to them asking if they were still Catholic, still held their Catholic beliefs, and still held their, Irish identity. And they said, "Yes, we still have all of those things. Thank you for being concerned. Here is a 12-pack.
There you go. I think for my own choices, I kind of rank them.
But after that, so there's Guinness, and then there's just almost anything brewed in Germany.
Okay. Say more about the German side.
I've never had a German beer I didn't like. I don't know what it is. I think the people there they've just been at it for so long. Particularly, it's brewed in German monasteries, and in some cases Belgian, but Belgium borders Germany, so
yeah, I'm more familiar with the Belgian side than I guess the German side.
So did last time, or at any point when you've visited me, did I ever give you anything from Ondex?
Not Ondex.
I know you and I had St. Benedict.
Yeah, we've had St. Benedictus, we've had Westmalle, and I've had Chimay, or we had Chimay.
We have had Chimay, Chimay is a Belgian, I think.
Okay.
Which is Trappist, which they are the best monks to make beer. Trappists are the best of the monks at making beer. So Belgian or Bavarian Trappists. Not just Germany, but specifically Bavaria, which is in the south of Germany, Nuremberg being its capital. I think. Bavarian and Belgian beers, specifically brewed by Trappists, are among the best in the world. And that's what the St. Benedict is also from an abbey. Andex is from a Bavarian abbey in the south of Germany. An excellent, excellent beer. The light beers, the medium, the ambers, and the darks. Not had a single one that I didn't like. I've never had a German beer that I didn't like in general.
Okay.
German or Dutch or Belgian.
Next time I
So
visit you, we'll have to have some of that Ondex.
That basic region is where I think, aside from Guinness, but Guinness is a particular it's a particular example, and it's a particular exception because every other Irish beer sort of falls short.
Yeah, I can't argue. So
German, Belgian, and Dutch beers brewed in monasteries are the best beers in the world. And I think this kind of goes without saying. You and I agree. IPAs are disgusting.
Well, we'll get to bad ones perhaps in a bit.
But we'll get to bad ones in a little bit, but what are yours that you have had?
So I've kind of can rank mine in terms of, we'll call them common beers. So beers that you can get for, like $12 or less for a pack at the store, basically. And then
Guinness is in that. I think Guinness is like $10 for a 6-pack.
Yep, Guinness is in that. So my two go-tos in that tier, if you will, are Guinness and Blue Moon, which are two like opposite flavored beers, but they both taste amazing for different reasons, and they taste well mixed together, which I've had multiple times.
Isn't Blue Moon is from Colorado, isn't it?
I don't know who makes Blue Moon.
I want to say that's brewed in Colorado.
Fair enough. Either way, I love Blue Moon. It's the beer I've had the most in my life by a significant margin.
It is very good. I would call that one of the best, at least top 3 American beers.
Yeah. It's in its tier. It's amazing.
It's a distinctly American brand.
When you get it on tap with that orange slice as well, I mean, it is
on perfect. Tap with an orange slice.
It's hard to beat.
The only thing that surpasses it is a Guinness on tap.
Yeah. And I'll have to figure this out, because right now the jury's out on this. You can make an argument for Guinness or Guinness Extra Stout. I love both.
Oh, the Extra Stout is also really, really good. It has, I will say, the Extra Stout has a little bit more of a bitterness in the back of the throat.
And they advertise it as bold and bittersweet, so that makes sense.
Which is, it lives up to its advertising, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'll have to try both of them again, perhaps side by side, and then make a verdict on that. But both are worthy of it.
Oh, yeah.
When you move into the higher tier, the two that come to mind to me are Tales of Gold, Dragon's Ale, Tales of Gold from New Holland in Michigan, and Chimay Blue. So I'd have to try the St. Benedict or St. Benedictus one again. That could potentially go up there. But since I can't remember what it tastes like, I can't put it up there. But I can put Chimay Blue up there. That is a worthy choice.
I can agree with you on that. I'll agree with you with the Chimay Blue on principle. The only bottle that I have is going to sit on my shelf and stare at me until I get a book published. Which is why I bought it in the first place. It's my motivation.
It'll be a worthy reward, I tell you. So,
the St. Benedict was very, very good. But if I'm going to compare, so let's do it this way. Chimay is probably the best Belgian Trappist ale, and I think most people probably won't contest that. So why don't we talk about just American beers?
Okay.
American ones that we know. I will agree with you about the Blue Moon, and I'll agree with you about Tales of Gold. Tales of Gold is probably the best American beer that I have ever had. And I have had a lot.
It's delish, I tell you.
It is magnificent. And it probably at least goes in my top 5 of beers that I have ever had, period. It can compete at least with most of what I've seen from the rest of the world and what I've tasted. It won't surpass Guinness, but it can compete with it.
That's coming from you. That's worthy. That is extraordinarily worthy. So, folks, just go get a pack. I know it's $17 for a 4-pack or whatever it is. Just
It's
go
worth
get it.
every cent, and it's actually worth more. You're getting a deal on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're drinking liquid buttered gold.
And if you have problems with temperance, it helps to actually spend more on the alcohol. So
it helps to spend more. It makes you not want to spend as much as often and get something good and not have as much, because it's only a 4-pack as well. So you don't have as much. It's a different type of culture of drinking. Because you and I are of the drink under a conversation culture. We are not of the, I'm going to sit on my lawn with a cooler next to me and drink every beer in it in the next 5 hours.
Yeah, that's what Coors Light is for.
And Bud Light, and Miller Lite, and Michelob. And of all of those, I will give Michelob the credit of being the finest. You can argue with me all you want. I think a Michelob Ultra is probably the finest of the cheap American beers.
I can't give it that.
The cheap Milwaukee beers is what I'm talking about.
I got to think about that. But I also don't want to go sampling a bunch to find out. So, of the dirt cheap ones, I'd probably give it to Miller. But
I don't have as much experience with Miller as I do with Michelob. And I arguably don't have as much with Bud Light, but the couple times that I've tasted it, it's vastly inferior.
My first ex referred to Bud Light as piss water. So, and that was a worthy that was a worthy name. So,
it is a worthy name. You should be drinking something better. I will render judgment if your favorite is Bud Light. I don't care. I will render judgment against you. You need to drink something better.
Yep.
You have not actually tasted good beer. Because the only reason to drink Bud Light is so that you can down 15 or 20 of them tailgating for a football game. And then be so drunk that you don't remember what the score was the next day.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see the appeal in having a kind of beer deliberately for shotgunning. And here's a good illustration. I'm going to try to say this in a way that won't get us banned. When my dad was 16, he and my grandfather went to work for a fellow named Frank Green, an old black guy. This was 1982. So, old black guy in 1982. My dad and my grandfather went to work for Frank Green. Do some construction work, get up on some scaffolding, do some trim, do some tuck pointing, around the house type stuff. And this is just, Frank Green is one of those just stereotypical old black guys, just a happy old coot that you can just sort of sit and listen to all day long.
All right.
Like, to give you an idea, at one point during the time that my dad and my grandfather were working for him, he goes, "Yeah, I'm 74 years old." And then his wife yells from the second floor of the house, "You old fool, you don't even know how old you is. You 86. It's the kind of man we're talking about. But when they're finished, Frank invites my grandfather and my dad in, and he says, "I'm gonna give both of you a beer because you earned it." And my dad's like, "Oh, I'm 16. I'm not old enough to drink yet." And Frank looks my dad in the eye and says, "You did a man's work. You drink a man's drink." And so he opens, and so my dad sort of starts to go to one cooler or one refrigerator or whatever it is, one pack of beer. And Frank goes, "Oh, no. You don't want that. That's for my black friends." Only he didn't say black.
Oh, okay.
No, no, the good stuff that I give to white people is over here. The good stuff for my white friends is over here. And he gives my dad. That's when my dad had his first beer. Not that I agree with Frank Green that, you know, this kind of beer is for those people and that kind of beer is for those people. But he understood. Like, this is the beer that we all drink because we want to get drunk. And this is the beer that we drink because it's good. And he at least understood the difference. And when he's giving my father his first beer, when he's giving a 16-year-old his first beer, he's like, no, that's not the one you want. You want the good stuff. I got the good stuff over here.
To the earlier point, or one thing I'm reminded of is something I said in episode 1, I think, of this podcast. And I promoted that, like Jim Beam White Label, like it's not a great whiskey, but you can at least enjoy it because it's the drink your father drank. It's the drink your grandfather drank. And so there can be something nostalgic to that. It's like, okay, fine. It's harder to play that argument for Bud Light.
Yeah.
Or Coors Light.
Because I don't see Bud Light being I have a glass of it with dinner, or I have one with, with a meal.
Yeah.
Or, I just have it and I sip at it while we're having conversation every now and again. Like, Bud Light I see as the tailgating drunk at a baseball game, which I will say is part of the charm of a baseball game, is that there will always be a drunk within earshot who will be shouting things. He's in literally this was the last baseball game I went to. He's in literally the highest point in the entire stadium, and he is shouting at the batter. I'm like, I don't think he can hear you, bro. I'm sorry. I don't think he can hear you. Like, yes, I know Burley can put the ball over the back wall. I don't think he can hear you.
Yeah.
I can hear you just fine, which is why I'm going to ask you to be quiet.
Yeah.
Because I just want to enjoy a baseball game with my wife.
Yeah, I guess as a way of summing it up, like that idea of having like Bud Light with a meal. I mean, you can't, but if you imagine trying to have Bud Light, yeah, it is wrong. It's a terrible image.
Because that's not, at least in the past 30 years, that's not the purpose of it.
Yeah, like it
has two purposes. It's like, it has maybe 3 purposes. It has tailgating and drinking during sporting events, doing a keg stand at a frat party, and just sitting on your lawn and drinking yourself silly.
Yeah, it's not even worth like the burger and fries that you made at home.
Yeah.
It's maybe worth putting it with McDonald's, which says a lot about McDonald's, actually.
Yes. That says more about McDonald's than it does about Bud Light.
Yeah. So on that note, yeah, the bad beers, IPAs. What's gosh awful. So I will say
as
this.
bad as Bud Light is, I will drink that before I drink an IPA.
I'll say this: I'm no fan of IPAs. I've had one good one that had an amazing name. It was called the Foggy Geezer.
I've not had that one.
It was it's by War Pigs. And it is a citrusy IPA. So there is something to counter some of the bitterness.
Then it's not an IPA if it has citrus in it.
No, it's a hazy IPA.
So the origin of IPAs is English sailors in India. That's what IPA stands for, is an India Pale Ale. Making beer themselves. And this is sailors that have no training in making beer, but they are so deprived of it that they're willing to try making it themselves off of the very limited knowledge that they have of making beer. And it tastes like shit.
Yeah.
Somebody may has, like, Bud Light is piss water, IPAs are shit water. It sounds like you are drinking the distilled liquids from the commode.
Good.
That's what IPAs taste like. which is why the citrus saves them, because then they just start squeezing all of their lime rations into them, because every sailor in the British Navy had a single lime ration a day as a prevention against scurvy, because scurvy is a vitamin C deficiency, or that's what it's born out of. So you make sure that all of your sailors have a lime a day. That actually gives them enough vitamin C that they can continue, and they'll be just fine at sea for however long it is that they need to be at sea. And limes kind of last forever because they're mostly acid. This is also where the gin and tonic comes from, because the gin and tonic is like they tasted they drank IPAs and then realized that, oh, this stuff tastes like shit, we're gonna try something else, and then they made the gin and tonic,
Mm-hmm.
which is inherently superior to any IPA. A bad gin and tonic is still better than a good IPA. But basically, yes, that's where IPAs come from. Is a bunch of sailors who didn't know what they were doing, trying to brew beer for themselves in India, away from England, where the best beer at the time was brewed, or the best beer that they were familiar with was brewed, trying to brew it in a culture that doesn't grow the right grain and doesn't have the right climate and doesn't even have the right culture for brewing beer.
So I thought my understanding of it was that the reason that it's so hoppy is because they realized that hops were a preservative, and you needed to keep the beer good on that long voyage from England to India.
That's another part of it, is they just like shoved as much hops into it as possible, and that just ruins the taste.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I cannot make a claim that, any brewery is doing this, but it would be a tactic to take a bad beer and turn it into an IPA with hops. Just saying.
Yeah, then you'll at least be able to sell it, because the hipsters will come and buy it. Which sort of... So as much as we have talked about what we think are the best beers, Guinness, Chimay, Tales of Gold, among some of the best. There's a Scottish one called Dirty Bastard that's also really good. What I would actually mostly encourage is the patronage of microbreweries.
Yeah.
Provided that it's a good one. Provided that the beer there is good. Because the thing about a microbrewery is that you are also putting money into your local economy, and this is just perfectly in keeping with the shop local, buy local, just be local, be part of your local community mindset. Like, there's a couple of microbreweries in our hometown. You cannot get those beers anyplace else. The downside to a lot of microbreweries, fortunately, I don't live in a city where this is a huge culture, but in larger cities and certain states like Colorado, this does tend to be a fairly huge culture. Microbreweries tend to be the watering hole for pretentious hipsters.
I know nothing of the stats, so...
Which that also tends to be the group that IPAs tend to attract. I don't know why it is, but just my observation is that the pretentious hipsters tend to buy IPAs more often than anybody else. Which at least they have a beer to match their personality, but it's
I mean, it's them, and it's men and women going through a midlife crisis.
Yeah, and trying to be cool.
Yeah, or they have
IPAs are the in thing right now. No, they're not. They taste like shit. Shut up.
You need to be a bit of a cynic or an angry person to like really enjoy an IPA.
But I will say the microbreweries do, at least the ones near me, they do have very good beers. And you should go to them, because the chances are a lot of the microbreweries that, especially the ones that aren't really huge and are deliberately keeping themselves from getting huge and just want to do a good business, you're going to have probably a better time and a better drink there than you would at maybe some others.
Yeah.
Than the microbreweries that wind up being just regular breweries and distributing one or two of their specific beers across the country.
Which is a good too, but you need to balance that.
Like there's Big Wheel, which is in Colorado. actually started in a microbrewery, but now they have at least 2 different beers that they distribute. And the 1554 is actually quite good. I will give them the 1554. It's pretty good. But just once you start distributing across the country, you sort of lose the being a microbrewery and being a local place.
To an extent, yeah. So I completely agree. Like, support local. And I say that with shame because I live a couple miles from the microbrewery in my hometown, and I live less than a couple miles from the microbrewery in the town that I currently reside in. And I go to neither, and I should go to both of them.
The only reason that I don't is because I can't currently afford to.
No, fair enough. But
there are 2 of them. Again, I live within an easy distance of 2 very good microbreweries. And I don't go to them because I can't really afford to, and neither of them actually bottles their beer. They only sell it in-house.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you got to be able to get a growler of it, then bring it home.
You might be able to. I don't actually know. I've never actually asked.
I'm not saying that you can, but
it's not like I can go to the liquor store and get a 6-pack of it.
Yeah.
That I would actually be able to afford every now and again. But yes, I will acknowledge that the 2 that are within reach of me are actually quite good. I lament that I'm not able to go to them as often as I should be able to.
Well, that's something we can make a goal of. So,
yeah.
What about wine? So, I have liked a lot of wines, and I almost exclusively buy international wines. That's just something I do, whether it's Italy or France or wherever. Like, I buy international. Yeah. The only exception I make, or the only real exception I make, is Apothic Red, which is a California that I absolutely love.
That one is pretty good. So, in my experience, the best wines that I've had have been Italian or Portuguese imports.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's just in my experience because those are the ones that I've had. But I think if you get just anything from around the Mediterranean or around that basic latitude, you'll probably get a pretty good wine. Because winemaking is such a scientific process that the latitude, the altitude, the atmosphere, the soil, everything has to be just right for a wine to be good. Which is actually why they talk about a good year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's a good year for wine? Well, it's a good climate for wine. Now they realize that, this batch that has been aging for a year, well, the year that we made it had this and this and this quality, and it's a particularly good kind of wine. It tastes particularly good, even though what we made the next year that had different qualities in the atmosphere and in the weather, that doesn't taste as good for some reason. That's why they make such a big deal about vintage in a lot of the snobbish, wine communities. I hate that word, community. Anyway, I just hate when it gets applied to all the wrong things. So, but I will still say that with wine, a lot of German wines are really good. I will also say that. So Germans make some of the best sweet wines on the sweeter end of the spectrum.
What was that sweet red German I got you? Was it a whites? Dobenhofer or whatever it was?
Oh, I don't remember. But Riesling is a very popular German wine.
Yeah. Well, that's a white, though.
It is a white, but it is a sweet white.
Yes.
So Germans actually make some of the best sweet wines. The Italians and the French and the Portuguese make some of the best moderate to bitter wines. Or whatever the opposite of dry. I don't typically like an excessively dry wine, just like I don't particularly like an excessively sweet wine. Because if it's an excessively sweet wine, it just kind of tastes like juice.
Yeah.
Which if I want to drink juice, I will just drink juice.
Mm-hmm.
And life is too short for me to be drinking wine out of a bag. I think we've all seen, like, for like 2 years when I was in high school and I was serving the daily mass at my parish, my heart broke because our communion wine came out of a bag.
No.
And I don't know how valid that actually was.
I'm sure it's valid. But...
I'm sure it was valid. I'm sure that the parish did their due diligence. But I remember getting a new associate, and he opens the cabinet and he sees that box with the bag in it and the spigot for the wine. He looks at that and he goes, "Oh, I didn't know we were at a sorority party."
Sad.
When you drink wine, beer is one thing. The kind of alcohol that you drink should be consumed in a specific way, because the kind that it is has a certain purpose and a certain dignity about it that should be respected. I don't know how much of this is just modern culture, but when we think of wine, we actually do think of a higher sort of culture.
Yeah.
Like when we think of sharing a beer over conversation, it's you and me with a beer by a campfire, which we can do that with a glass of wine too, but you put a glass of wine in my hand, I expect there to be classical music in the background.
It is naturally a higher thing, even than whiskey and scotch and
It
and
could be
liquor.
because of its use in the Eucharist. That might be it. Or it could also be because it's one of the oldest forms of alcohol known to man. Like, man has been making wine for millennia.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament. Long, long time, man has been making wine. But there just seems to be something more elegant about a glass of wine than there is about a bottle of beer. Even though they are both good in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably equally good in their own right. It's more situational.
Yeah. Just because it's higher doesn't mean that it's better.
Probably because of a situational aesthetic, I would say.
Yeah. No, I think you could do a massive deep dive on why that's the case, but you're right. That's the short
It's
answer. You're right.
the aesthetics of a glass of wine versus the aesthetics of a pint of beer.
Yeah.
It's the we're having a conversation at the bar in the pub versus we're having a conversation in an art gallery.
Yeah. And so I don't need to be, pretentious and swirl the glass and try and get the leather overtones and such. But I also shouldn't be, buying the wine glass that intentionally holds an entire bottle of wine.
Yeah,
Like, well,
that's
for all sorts of reasons. Actually,
so.
just don't do that.
Don't be the sad yuppie woman. Yeah, but what was it? The last time you and I were in a liquor store together, there was one bottle of wine that was just like Sassy Black Lady or Sassy Black Girl was the name of the wine.
Oh,
And
it's
I
ringing
looked
a
at
bell in
that
my
and
head.
was like, that just seems to be an insult to the dignity of wine.
Yeah, it screams. It screams sorority.
Yeah.
On a good day.
Yeah.
And at its worst, it screams depression.
The same way that Bud Light screams fraternity.
Yeah.
A wine with that kind of name screams sorority.
And I
Which
guarantee
that should not be striven for at all either.
I guarantee that's not what Bud Light aimed at. Yeah.
No, what Bud Light aimed at was making as much beer as cheaply as possible because of industrialization, but we've gone over why that's a bad idea. So, yeah, don't be a sad yuppie woman. Don't be a sorority girl when you're drinking wine. I think that's another reason we think of wine as being a higher cultured thing. There's a lot of people that think of wine as being more feminine in nature, whereas beer is more masculine. And I think a lot of that has to do just with the sorority and the fraternity cultures of the frats drinking excessive amounts of Bud Light and the sororities just drinking excessive amounts of wine from a bag. But also with a again, a 20th century idea that women are the cultured ones. Women are the ones who care about manners and elegance and beauty. And all men care about is what's ugly and nasty and disgusting and wrong. Like, men get down and get their hands dirty, but women clean them up. Type of thing. The woman is the one who is dragging her husband to the classy event and forcing her sons to learn how to dance and set a table, even though no 8-year-old boy on the planet needs to know how to dance or set a table for a fancy dinner. No 8-year-old boy on the planet needs to know that. Go out, let him go out and catch frogs and be a boy. But there's this idea that always women are the ones that let us have culture and beauty, whereas men are the ones that are vulgar and hardworking, and that's the kind of thing that men care about. So I think beer is a thing for men because it's typically more bitter, and wine is a thing for women because it's typically sweeter. I think that's where part of this distinction comes from.
There's a negative side to it, but because I'm thinking out loud, let me put a...
More negative than what I've already laid out, because I've laid out nothing positive so far.
Let me put a positive twist on it. So, a man's job is to protect and provide, and so it makes sense that he would get his hands dirty. And it makes sense that he would drink something simple and common in the midst of that, in the midst of his battle on this earth. And beer is a fitting drink. And maybe he's having a sophisticated conversation in the evening, and whiskey seems appropriate for that. But who he's protecting and providing and arguing for the sake of is the highest creation in all the world, which is the woman. And it makes sense that the most dignified drink in the world, wine, would be associated with the woman.
You could say that, but there's also nothing not manly about a good glass of red wine.
I agree.
Or even a good glass of white. There is nothing inherently unmanly about a glass of wine.
I agree, but that requires more of an elevation of the image of the man than it does the image of the woman. And that elevation is warranted. But if you're just talking
say
from
that when I have just a glass of wine on my own for whatever reason I can think of, I feel like a yuppie. Whereas when I can just kind of sit down and have a beer, I don't. I just feel like a normal human being.
I think that's a you problem, but
it probably is, because I'm just a pretentious asshole. But
who doesn't like pretentious?
Yeah. I have my own sort of pretension. Everybody does.
Yeah, that's true. What about whiskey?
So going from the, I guess, softer liquors to the harder alcohols, because beer and wine are among I guess we would call them the soft alcohol. Everybody talks about hard alcohol and then doesn't say soft alcohol. Like beer can't have an alcohol content anywhere from 1.2% to like 17%. Like beer can't also be that far from being a hard alcohol. But if we're going to talk about the hard alcohols, the most popular, yes, would be whiskey. The best is from Ireland, Scotland, and Kentucky, as a rule. To which there are exceptions. I include Kentucky because of bourbon, because that's where bourbon was created. That is, bourbon is a specific branch of whiskey that I think is excellent. It has its own uniqueness and its own sort of greatness. I still think that the best whiskey in the world is Irish. This Irish whiskey will have, especially a good Irish whiskey, will have a sweetness and a bitterness and a bite that is all pleasant. Most whiskeys from elsewhere, granted my experience with Scotch is limited, but I think it's very similar. It has what I've had has had some similar qualities to the Irish whiskey.
You haven't had all Scotch then, so.
I've not had all Scotch, no.
Try a peated Scotch sometime. That's its own beast.
I say having a Scottish name and being of a Scottish clan, but anyway, I will say that Irish whiskey is, in my opinion, the best at whiskey in the world. As a rule, the Irish make the best whiskey, or make most of the best whiskey, to which there are exceptions. The best whiskeys that I've had, the Quiet Man, Jameson, which I know a lot of people think is like a cheap trash whiskey, but we'll get into what I actually think of as cheap trash whiskey later. So, the Quiet Man, Jameson, Four Roses, and yes, all bourbon is technically whiskey. It's just whiskey made a specific way.
Yes, that's what it is.
Four Roses.
You should say Four Roses small batch, though, not standard Four Roses.
It's been long enough time for me that since I've had small batch, that I just use Four Roses in general because I really like the standard Four Roses.
Fair enough.
I think it is good enough to be among that, particularly at the price point. Elijah Craig, which is of a much higher price point. And for the fifth one, I will give it to my Pinckney Bend Distillery, which we have here in Missouri, and you can't really get anywhere else.
Enough then.
Of a good corn whiskey. Although an honorable mention would be the Cantilever that you brought me once, the rye whiskey from Minnesota. That stuff was good.
That was.
And it is mostly purely my Missouri loyalty that put Pinckney Bend on the list instead of Cantilever.
I consider that an honor. So, Cantilever's amazing. I need to get another bottle of it. I think I would generally agree in terms of tastes. I wouldn't put Scotch on the list for me at all. I'd probably just limit it to bourbon and other Americans and Irish. So I might get used to Scotch more eventually, but I don't. It's got its own taste. It's not bad, but it's got its own taste, and especially the peated stuff. But anyway, on the Irish side, the best one I've had is Redbreast 12.
I forgot about Redbreast. Yeah.
So I did buy a bottle of that once. It was stupid expensive. It also was delicious.
I've had the 8-year. Did they make an
12.
8-year? Or is 12 the lowest year?
If whatever is the standard one. Whatever's the standard one. So if that was 8, then I had 8. But that was delicious. Quiet Man is delicious to your point.
Quiet Man has an 8-year. Typically it's 6. They have an 8.
Okay.
That is actually better, in my opinion.
Isn't the 8 also aged in bourbon casks?
Maybe.
You've given me a richer Quiet Man that had more vanilla in it from that type of thing, and you've given me regular, and I've had both. I love them. They're really good. On the American side, I'd have to think, but Four Roses small batch for me would be one of them. That Cantilever would probably be, that would be a good one. I'd have to try it again to for sure put it up there. Old Forester 100's good.
It is. I'll put that as another honorable mention for me. But mostly because of the bite that I got from that first glass of it, I think it loses points in that.
Okay.
It's still really good after that first glass, but that first glass still does have to take a few points away from it. Okay. Whereas there are the others that are on the list, every single glass that I've had of that, except for the Pinckney Bend, because for some reason the second glass of that I had issues with. That could also be because I wasn't used to the taste of corn whiskey. That's like the only corn whiskey I've ever had.
No. The other one I would be open to putting in my list without even trying it, without even trying anything in its category, is some very good version of an American single malt. I would be very intrigued to try that. I have heard of some really good examples of it that have blown people's minds, and that would be fun. So,
another honorable mention is something that you brought me the last time you came to visit, which was Keeper's Heart, being a blend of bourbon and Irish whiskey, which are two very, very different things, two very, very different kinds of whiskey that I did not know could be blended in that manner.
Yeah, they had
and it was a welcome surprise.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you liked it, but yeah, they had a version
It also just has a great
bourbon and
bottle.
yeah, they had a version with Irish and bourbon mixed together, and they had one with American rye and Irish mixed together, which I did not buy, but also
Yeah.
has a great looking bottle. It's basically the white version of the black
Mm,
label. So both sharp, both good designs.
yeah. So this all to say that no matter what whiskey it is, it will always be an acquired taste.
Oh yeah.
And I think this will be revisited again in when we just talk about men and masculinity in general. But I think it is a more masculine thing to deliberately gravitate towards things that are more quote unquote unpleasant. Like drinking whiskey and stouter beers and spending an entire day fishing. And we all know fish don't smell good.
Hmm.
And
Be careful now. The logical extension of this is IPAs.
it's a complete logical conclusion is IPAs, but IPAs are an offense against God and man and on the nature of beer in general, and they should all be eradicated from the face of the earth.
Fair enough. No, I can't argue with you. And I want to hear your story about how you came to like whiskey and try it and enjoy it and all that stuff. Because for mine, and you were present for this, I tried it and I hated it. Um, but I wanted to like it, and so I kept trying it. And thankfully, I started with some good stuff, but also some really bad stuff, like the Evan Williams "You'll Never Let Me Live" down. Um, mixed in with some Quiet Man and Connemara. I remember hating Jameson when I first tried it. I did not like that. Now I do. Um, but it's been an acquired taste, and I legitimately enjoy it. So,
So I think my first glass of whiskey, I'm pretty sure, was Jameson. And that was about the time that. So actually, my first glass of whiskey I ever had, I was not 21, but it was okay because I was in Italy at the time and the legal drinking age over there is 18. Or maybe 16, it might depend on where you are. But I was in Rome at the time and the legal drinking age was 18. My 20th birthday. No, that was when I smoked my first cigar. My uh, Shortly after that, the Feast of the Archangels, I went to the Abbey Theater, the Irish pub in Rome, with a couple of friends, and I ordered a Jameson. And I actually wound up. I did like it. There were things about it that I didn't like as much, but liking a whiskey is not about liking it in its entirety. It is more about being able to ignore the things that you don't like.
there's a bite.
There is a bite to it. There is something of a burn just because of the alcohol content. And the first whiskey I ever had was a Jameson, which makes my Irish blood sing for joy and my Scottish blood weep. But, if the Scottish could actually make a whiskey that was reasonably priced, maybe I would have more of it. And I thought it was. So my first sip of it, and I had been warned of this by my dad, because he fully expected me before I went overseas to drink, because it was legal over there. Uh, he told me that it would bite the first time I had it, and I think he had actually given me a taste of it first before I even went over. Because Missouri law, if you're in your parents' home, there really is no legal limit. So I would say my first sip of whiskey I didn't care for, but I kept at it. I kept drinking it, and by the end of the glass, I loved it. And I was slightly scared to try other whiskeys, because I just decided in my head that that was the best one, and there was no point. But then I had Quiet Man, and I will say Quiet Man is superior to Jameson.
Yeah, I mean it better be.
And now I like Quiet Man is probably my favorite whiskey. In terms of my actual personal favorites, it'll be Quiet Man and Four Roses. Two things that at a good price I will never pass up ever.
All right.
And, oh gosh, I don't even remember when I had my first Four Roses.
It probably was something I got you in college.
I think it was something you got me in college.
Yeah, I went looking for cheap stuff. I knew it was like a good cheaper one.
I want to say that
Brought
was
that back,
sometime
and then
senior year. You were looking for cheaper stuff, and for its price point, I would say that Four Roses is probably among the best. Like, I can get that at the Sam's Club in town for $16. A
yeah,
regular 750 ml bottle of regular Four Roses for $16, and it is among the cheapest whiskeys that they have there.
hmm
It's also among some of the best. I
yeah.
remember when I saw that, like the last time that I went shopping with my wife in Sam's Club, I was like, is that the right? Screw it, I'm getting two. I'll make it last a while. But whiskey in general is definitely an acquired taste. You probably will not like your first drink. If you do, there's probably something wrong with you, and you should acknowledge that and then control it. Because I'm not going to say that anybody should just right out of the gate deprive themselves of the joy of good whiskey. But I think it's like men insist on drinking good whiskey because it tastes bad, which it really doesn't. After you've acquired the taste for whiskey in general, you'll know the difference between a good and a bad.
hmm
Uh, but it is something that requires effort and work to get to, and is something that is difficult at first.
But worth it, like all good adventures.
Yes. Now, this is not at all to excuse inferior whiskeys, because cheap whiskey has no purpose. Yes, I am looking at Jack Daniels and Evan Williams.
I don't know
There's
that
no
I don't know
there,
that I
there
put Jack Daniels in the same boat. Evan Williams, there's no discussion.
Yeah, Evan Williams. There's no discussion. It does not deserve a place at the table of at any table when it in regards even of slightly inferior whiskeys. It does not deserve a place at any table. That stuff is horrible and
Yeah,
has no
standard Black
purpose.
Label.
It has no purpose apart from maybe mixing and then encouraging drunkenness. Like, the only reason to buy a handle of Evan Williams is because it is the cheapest thing on the shelf and you burn through it like an engine from the 1970s.
And as we said on the last podcast, it's a weapon.
Yes. Which, yeah, the only good thing about Evan Williams is the fact that the bottle is heavy enough that I can hit somebody in the head with it and probably down him if he tries to attack me. The only good thing about Evan Williams. Now, that's the base. I don't know if they make any other kinds, any other labels. I deliberately didn't include Johnny Walker because I've heard that there are a couple of different labels of Johnny Walker that are actually pretty good. I know Jack Daniels does have, I think, like white label Jack Daniels is supposed to be really good. Black label, the last time I had it mixed and I had it straight, and I went, yeah, this is way better if it's mixed, which is not a way that you should react to any kind of whiskey.
Oh, okay.
It should be at least equally good mixed and straight, which is where the Woodford Reserve kind of comes into the conversation because it's really good straight. It's also really good in the way that my mother-in-law makes an old-fashioned.
Fair enough. I have never bought Jack Daniels. I've never bought regular Jack Daniels. I have bought the small batch select, or
Okay.
special reserve select, or whichever one it was, and the bottle of that I bought at the time was a store pick.
Mm.
So it was going to be even better, or at least in the store's opinion, they got their own hand in picking that one. So
That
that
I'll
was
say I've not had.
yeah, that was actually really good. But I make no claim about that. And on the Evan Williams front, I've been told that their bottled and bond is actually pretty good.
Hmm.
But we have said everything that we need to say about their regular stuff.
Yeah, you watched me taste Evan Williams for the first time.
I can't remember
I
anything.
tasted Evan Williams when my experience with whiskey was Irish whiskeys and good bourbon. I think I actually did cough when I drank it. I did the stereotypical, like, because it was like drinking liquid smoke.
Yeah, it was
So I'm
that good.
aware is also a thing. That is a thing you put in your grill.
If you do.
To make your steak taste maybe a little bit better. But with all of this in mind, we'll take the same attitude towards whiskey and distilleries that we do towards beer and breweries. That is, we will encourage the local distilleries and breweries. Now, local, in the case of distilleries, doesn't necessarily mean your hometown or the next town over, because those actually are a lot less common than breweries are, just because the distilling process takes more time and it's more difficult. So I would say at least try to find one in your home state, relatively near to your location. I know there are several in the state of Missouri. The closest one that I know of, that I know is good, is about an hour from me, which this is Missouri. It's both the South and the Midwest at the same time. If you can't drive an hour for good whiskey or good gin, what are you doing with your life?
Speaking of that good gin,
let's talk about the inferior forms of hard alcohol.
Yeah, we've said many positive things about the cask finished gin from Pinckney Bend Distillery in Missouri, which is absolutely delicious. But my understanding is that you generally don't have that positive of an opinion of gin and tequila and vodka. And
generally, gin and tequila and vodka, like as much of an acquired taste as whiskey is, at least tequila and vodka is even more so. Now, a lot of that is probably because tequila and vodka come about from literally not having anything else to make alcohol out of other than rotten potatoes and cactus juice.
That's two of them. What do you make gin with?
Gin is actually made from juniper. And it can be, at least certain kinds of it are. I don't know a great deal about gin, but I know that certain kinds of gin are actually made with juniper, with like juniper branches from like the juniper tree in the cedar family, which is why it kind of sometimes has that cedary kind of evergreen smell to it. Why it sometimes kind of smells like air freshener.
Kind of sounds like a reason
like
I might
Sol.
like it. So
that's why gin smells like pine sol to a lot of people, because of what it's made with. I don't know if that's the only thing it's ever made with. I don't know a whole lot about the process of gin. What I do know about gin and vodka and tequila is that their primary uses culturally are mixing. And that is usually not a great sign as far as the taste and quality of the thing in question goes when it comes to alcohol, because an alcoholic drink should probably be at least good by itself. You shouldn't have to mix it with a whole bunch of other things to hide its own taste, or add a whole bunch of other things to it to hide the natural taste of the thing itself.
I wonder how much of that is just our own American culture, though. But I haven't
had a good British gin or a genuine Russian. Oh, no, I have had a good Polish vodka.
Okay.
And the Poles make very good vodka. Tequila is a lot more easy to get. Like, genuine tequila is a lot more easy to get access to. But the only tequila that I've ever really had was Codigo, and I think you and I each had that at the same time. That is something that is definitely an acquired taste.
Oh yeah, it's different.
It was good and is very different, but yeah, it's very different. Definitely acquired taste, but I would still say it was good.
Mm-hmm. Also works in old fashions, actually. I've had a tequila old fashioned once.
Really?
It was actually quite good.
I have to try that sometime.
So, took it off of a drunk woman at a bar, but you know.
Generally, the principle is avoid anything in a plastic bottle. This is going back to my friend Sarah's saying, "A life is too short to drink vodka out of a plastic bottle."
Yeah.
If it comes in a plastic bottle, it is not worth your time. If the distillery is not willing to put enough cost into it, at least the cost of a glass bottle into it, it is really not worth your time.
Might as well get something that looks good.
Something that at least look good, and a glass bottle for any of those things is probably going to taste better.
Mm-hmm.
And this
Plastic
also
bottle of,
applies to rum, but rum is pretty much just for pirates and cake baking.
depends, I guess, on if Captain Morgan's counts as rum, because that is dangerously good.
That is Captain Morgan, I think, is rum.
Yeah, I know it is.
But
But
yeah,
does it like
rum is
does it
basically for Jack Sparrow and Betty Crocker.
what I mean by that is, does it count as rum in the same elegant fashion?
There's nothing elegant about rum, man, in the first place.
Okay.
Rum is another one where it's like you have to add it to it, like it is an ingredient to other things. It doesn't typically have good in and of itself. It is best as an ingredient to other things, like a rum cake, or like my wife makes a really good pina colada with a coconut rum as the liqueur.
Can't argue with pina coladas.
But yes, but just really quickly, and we'll throw rum and brandy into this of the others when it comes to the hard alcohols, the ones that are typically not consumed straight. That's gin, vodka, tequila, rum, and brandy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, brandy is also consumed straight. It also tends to be for snobs and academics. Unless you're from Wisconsin, then it's like the only thing you'll ever put in an old fashioned.
That's the weird overlap
That's
there.
the weird exception to that. Usually, when you think of brandy, if you're from anywhere other than Wisconsin, you think of brandy as being for snobs and academics and people at parties who are too snobbish to even drink the wine. Or it's an after dinner, hey, let's go into the parlor for brandy and cigars type of thing. And I've had good brandy before. And a good brandy is still quite good. So I'll give them that. I'll have good brandy with a good cigar. That's a good mix.
Perhaps we should just branch out a bit. You got me to branch out with gin a little bit.
Yeah. I probably do need to branch out and actually experience these other things, but I'm merely speaking to my limited experience of them,
Mm-hmm.
which my experience of something, of a liquor or of an alcohol, if I can't drink it straight, then I don't see any point in having it in the first place. If when somebody is telling me about some alcohol, whatever is being suggested, and one of the first things out of his mouth is, well, you don't want to drink it straight. I'm like, well, then I don't want it at all.
Yeah. That says something about you or the liquor. So,
well, you don't want to drink it straight. You want to mix it with something else. And there are some that are, like, I will say, they're good mixed with other things. But when you have something that is good by itself and then you mix it with something else, you are adding to it and accentuating that flavor. And just the experience of whatever the drink is.
Case in point, the old fashioned. Long gone at this
exactly.
point.
Which, there's not very many mixed drinks you need other than that.
No. Even
unless you're a woman.
That glass. It's perfect.
Unless you're a woman, you don't really need many other mixed drinks than that.
Yeah. They make a lot of them.
Old-fashioned. There's a lot of them. Some of them have names that are not worth repeating, and some of them are just...
I know.
Like, I eschew mixology as a thing, just as a concept. I don't want a mixologist. I want a bartender. I want a guy who will look me square in the eye and tell me that I'm an idiot while he's cleaning a glass.
I like those people too.
I want a guy who will, whether I'm asking him to make me an old fashioned or whether I'm just saying, you know what, just give me a beer. I don't really care what it is. And he just reaches down under the counter and grabs me the first thing his hand touches. That's who I want at the bar. I don't want the guy who I ask for a beer and then goes, I'm a mixologist. Some people serve, I create. I'm like, yeah, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah, I want the creativity, but I want it to be understated. Like, hey, it's,
Yeah.
you may actually like this cool thing. Let me just make it for you.
It's the principle that the reason a lion doesn't roar is that all the other animals know he's king.
Hmm.
You shouldn't have to tell everybody how great you are at your job.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to tell anybody how great of a bartender you are. You shouldn't have to call yourself a mixologist, which is like just a made up word from the last couple decades.
Perhaps in closing, I'll bring up an odd one that most people probably don't know about. They've heard of it, but they've never, ever seriously considered trying it, which is mead. And I must say, mead is delicious.
Yes. It is.
And that
I
one
call
mead,
it a welcome surprise.
yeah, that one mead, by the way, that we saw at the liquor store when we were last there together, the Viking Blood.
Mm-hmm.
I have since bought that and consumed it, and it is amazing.
Viking Blood is an excellent, excellent mead. There was that Polish one that you and I saw that we took a picture of that
Yeah,
had
beautiful
that
bottle.
excellent, gorgeous, gorgeous clay bottle with a wax seal
Yeah, it was
and just
awesome.
everything about at least the aesthetic of it done correctly.
Mhm.
Mead is an interesting thing because it is the those that have played Skyrim are familiar with this, but it is like the quintessential Viking drink. It's if you've played Skyrim, it is the thing that you will get in any tavern in Skyrim that is run by Nords. It is the Nord drink. I mean, Miracle of Sound has an entire song called Nord Mead that is
Yep.
just like pounding and manly and just like listening to it makes you grow like 12 more hairs on your chest. But then you taste it and it's just honey with a little bit more of a bite to it. It is just the smoothest and sweetest thing. And then you drink that and go, maybe my perception of Vikings is wrong.
Yeah.
It's like we think of them as being big and hairy and vulgar, and then we drink this, which is like their favorite thing.
Yeah. Like mead could be something super high class if it didn't have that distinction,
It could
honestly.
be. And it's excellent for dessert,
Yeah, like that
which we
Viking.
forgot to talk about port as well. Um,
Yeah.
but that is a subsection of wine that is dessert wine specifically from Portugal, which is also very good. But mead is it's technically a honey wine, but is still kind of in a class of itself because it is something distinct from most other wines.
Hmm. Yeah, like just as an image for people, that Viking blood. Um, I love how in the bottle they say this is based on a recipe from about the year 1700. We don't know exactly
Yeah,
when, but about there. And then they
which is
add,
probably a descendant of a recipe from about the year 1500, which is a descendant of a recipe from about the year 1000.
could be, but they add dried hibiscus and ginger to it, and it is so amazing.
Oh, it is. It's
It
been a
is,
while since I've had it, but it is excellent. So
yeah.
on our hutch in the dining room, I have at the very top of it, on either side of my decanter and tumblers, I have what I call my skyline of liquor, where I keep a bottle of what I think is the best of whatever I've had. And there is a bottle of the Viking blood up there. For one, if it's a cool enough bottle, it goes up there just on the virtue of that. But if
Hmm.
it's a particularly good whiskey, that's also how I remember what's a really good whiskey that I've had. I'm like, oh yeah, I drank that and I liked it. The Viking blood is currently the only mead up there, just
Fair
because I
enough.
haven't had that Polish one that you and I ran into yet.
Yeah, what a great bottle, though.
And I can't enough recommend just a good mead for anybody. And the first time I actually had that, fortunately I was old enough at the time, but it was second semester of junior year, I think. I was taking a medieval history course, and in part of this course, our professor uh, had scheduled a medieval dinner where everybody was going to find a recipe in these medieval cookbooks that she had brought in, and we were all going to cook that. And we all had dinner at her house, and we were all sitting around the table, and she served us mead, those of us that were old enough. My wife was in that class as well, and I think she was like a week away from turning 21. So she was really irritated that she could not have the mead. But that was my first encounter with mead, and I was expecting mead to be like a beer. I was expecting it to be like an ale. And then I tasted it and went, wow, this is really the Norsemen. This was their favorite. It's just this honey and ginger and hibiscus. Like, wow, okay, I guess my entire perception of them is wrong.
They're normal people, and then the berserkers went on shrooms, and, well, your image changes.
Which apparently a lot of the Vikings were actually so well groomed and kept themselves so clean and kept their beards braided and cleaned and their hair cleaned and braided. A lot of them were so well groomed that one of the bigger fears that English men had was that their wives were going to just voluntarily leave with the more handsome Viking men. Rather than them being taken, the Englishmen were just scared that their wives were just going to leave with them. I'm like, yeah, they were a brutal and vicious people, but apparently they knew a thing or two about style and good alcohol and actually making things taste good, which this should be proof to anybody that just because something is sweet does not make it less manly. Because the Vikings gave us mead, and there is nobody more historically macho than than the Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
And their favorite thing was mead, which is one of the sweetest things that you can ever drink now. So that's more than 2 cents, but that's kind of our 2 cents about mead.
Yep.
Is that it's never
Anybody would
never
like
not
mead.
recommended. And a really quick story, just because I have to make everything a history lesson. In the Middle Ages, it became customary for when a couple got married for someone to give the couple a bottle of honeyed wine or mead. And this is intended for them to last because it's part of their celebration of them becoming one, of them forming a new family. And it's intended for them to last them, based on serving and portion sizes, about a month or about one moon. And there are a lot of people that think that this is where we get the phrase, or the word honeymoon. Because it is the one moon of honey wine.
That's nice. When I get married, I should do that. It's been an absurd amount of money doing it.
Let somebody buy you a bottle of mead. Don't get it for yourself, because then it's just kind of sad.
Well, I need people to buy me multiple bottles if it's going to last me a full moon. And my wife.
That's true. It has to.
Because mead's delicious.
It is. Yeah.
This is not like, oh, you're going to buy a bottle of whiskey and Dominic will just drink this slowly, and it will only be him. Mead, anybody will love mead. In keeping with...
I can see for some people it may be being too sweet, at least certain meads, but I think it's great. Yeah. I love mead.
Yeah, if you don't like sweet things, then fair enough. In keeping with saving dessert for last and also supporting local things, you briefly brought up port. And so I'd like to tell a story about the best port I've ever had. Well, granted, I've only had 2. Last winter, I went to a wine tasting at a local vineyard, less than half an hour from where I live, called Sovereign Estates in Waconia, Minnesota. And this is a Catholic place through and through. There are not many places you can go where you are at the wine tasting bar, and then you turn to your right, and there's a St. Michael the Archangel statue right there. Or you walk out on the grounds, and there is a prayer garden with statues of Our Lady and the Sacred Heart and St. Anthony.
Oh, you sent me a video of that a while ago, I think.
Yeah. This is amazing stuff. They have an Ave Maria rosé wine that's very good. But the last thing I got to taste at this wine tasting was something called the Ignatius, which was, thankfully they let us taste it in a wine tasting because they only made 300 bottles of it on a limited run.
Maybe if I brought my son up there and told them that his name is Ignatius, maybe they'll give me a bottle for free.
Then maybe. probably all gone now, and I helped. But this was their port wine. And I have never had a wine that tasted like bread pudding. And if you don't know what bread pudding is, shame on you. It's basically the fat version of French toast, with raisins, and it's amazing.
It's French toast, but it's like fat and mushy and greasy and
yeah,
amazing.
I've had delicious wines. Not that I'm a man of a sophisticated palate, but I'm not. But I've had delicious wines. I've had great mead. I've had a couple kinds of great mead. I have never possibly ever had a wine more delicious than that Ignatius. That was the most incredible thing. And I hope they make more of it, because otherwise I'll never get it again.
Hopefully it was enough of a success that they bring it back.
Hopefully.
So I had a really good wine, a really good port in St. Augustine, Florida. Actually, before we were married, my wife and I went down and had Thanksgiving there with her family. And part of that trip was we took a tour of the local distillery and the San Sebastian winery.
Yeah.
That makes actually two ports. One is in sort of a regular looking bottle, and the other one is in a ship decanter bottle, a nautical decanter bottle. And you can tell the nautical shape because basically all of the weight and the mass is in the bottom. It's basically a giant disc with a neck. And the reason for that is because you want it to be something that you can put on a shelf in the cabin of a ship and withstand the rocking motion of the ship. So you have to lower the center of gravity of the bottle as much as possible so that it doesn't fall over.
So it's not shaped like a ship. It's just designed to be in that setting.
Yes. It's designed to be used on a ship. And there, the port, the regular port was good. The port that was in the nautical bottle was delectable. It was so sweet. And think of the best grape you've ever tasted. It was that, but rich and thick. Again, kind of like the bread pudding that you're talking about. And that's so far as my best experience with port. I bought a bottle of the inferior stuff for myself, and then the better stuff for my brother. And he also said that he hasn't really tasted a better port, except a couple that actually came from Portugal. But he has not tasted a better American port than that. But I should, if they bring back the Ignatius the next time I'm up in Minnesota, then I think you and I are going to go and have a tasting.
If they have it, let's do it. I'll be going there for a tasting this winter again. I know last time I was really... I don't think they had any bottles available. They didn't have any bottles available for sale at the time, which was sad, because I would have potentially bought one. Even if it had been... They charge a lot for their wines there. It wouldn't have necessarily been an obstacle.
See, as much as I want it, and as much as I'm attracted to the possibility of it, I also know better than to come up and make a road trip to Minnesota in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Not that driving in Minnesota would be as bad, but driving through Iowa in the winter.
Yeah, it's long too.
It's long and potentially very bad. I've done that, and I don't want to do it again.
No, don't blame you. Don't blame you. So, go enjoy a drink with friends this week.
But do it correctly.
Do it correctly.
And if we are to leave you with a few good quotes from great thinkers and at least one mystic, I have two from Chesterton. The wonderful G.K. Chesterton. The first is that you should drink because you are happy, never because you are sad. If you drink in mourning, you are drinking incorrectly. The second is that in Catholicism, the pipe, the pint, and the cross can all fit together. And actually a third is that there are fewer better things in life than a good thick steak and a glass of red wine and a good cigar.
Yeah.
Hilaire Belloc, another one of the great Catholic thinkers of the last century, said, actually before he even became Catholic, in his experience that led to conversion, wherever the Catholic sun doth shine, there is always food and much good wine. At least I have always found it so. Benedicamus Domino. And then I believe you had one from St. Bridget of Sweden.
St. Bridget of Ireland, actually.
St. Bridget of Ireland.
I was wrong about that initially. Because this is not just a worldly pursuit.
Also a mystic.
This is some good enjoyment of alcohol is something aimed at heaven. And might even be something enjoyed in heaven. So, this quote is almost definitely not actually from St. Bridget of Ireland, but it is attributed to her. And it's still worth paying attention to.
We'll take it at face value.
I should like a great lake of beer for the King of Kings. I should like the angels of heaven to be drinking it through time eternal. I should like excellent meats of belief and pure piety. I should like the men of heaven at my house. I should like barrels of peace at their disposal. I should like for them cellars of mercy. I should like cheerfulness to bring in their drinking. I should like Jesus to be there among them. I should like the three Marys of an illustrious renown to be with us. I should like the poor of heaven, the poor, to be gathered around from all parts. Presumably drinking. And contemplating the good God in whose presence they are for all eternity. So prep for that with a good drink with friends this week, and we'll see you next time.